Hi everyone, my name is Tatiana Shchekina. Since my last name is completely unpronounceable, I go by Tatiana. I'm a motion designer and art director based in Los Angeles, California. Over the past 15 years, I had a chance to work as a motion designer in television, advertising agencies, and in-house at big companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and AT&T. I'm currently working at Slack, and here is my showreel. I'm very excited to be here, and I want to thank Maxon for inviting me to present here for the second time. Last time I made a presentation about my journey from 2D to 3D. I also was talking about opening Cinema 4D for the very first time. I was still at college studying architecture and interior design back then. Eventually, I moved away from architecture to the world of motion design, and I never looked back. I really love that on my day-to-day work I get to both design and animate, work with different styles and learn new tools. Today in my presentation I want to focus more specifically on Stylized 3D. I'm very passionate about it and I love using Cinema 4D and Redshift to create Stylized 3D animation. They have pretty much all the necessary tools to create any kind of style and they are very intuitive. So even if you are new to 3D, you can figure out things pretty quickly. My presentation today is for designers and animators who are starting out with Cinema 4D and very interested in creating Stylized 3D. I will cover things like simple techniques to create a 3D emoji, Stylized 3D looping animation. When you work with Stylized 3D, you can create a bunch of different styles and looks and also design something that didn't exist before. It also unfortunately means that you have to model a bunch of stuff from scratch. Thankfully, Cinema 4D has a bunch of useful tools that lets you model easily and fast. You can use box modeling techniques or sometimes just primitives and deformers. Volume Builder is also an amazing tool for fast modeling. Additionally, Cinema 4D has a bunch of useful tools for simple rigging, where you don't even have to create bones or do weight painting. I will go over some of these techniques in this presentation. So let's dive right into it and see how we can easily create 3D emoji with Cinema 4D and Redshift. I'm currently working at Slack as a senior motion designer. I get to work with a lot of Stylized 3D there, and I love it. I created this party emoji animation for one of the Slack videos. I would love to share with you how I approached this animation and how I created a rig for it. So let's dive right into it. Let's open a new project by going to File, New Project, or using shortcut Ctrl-N. So in order to create a very good emoji, we need a reference image to follow along with. Let's press the square here to see all our other views. We have top, right, and front. And let's go to the front view, View, Configure, and in the back here, we can insert our image. So let's adjust the size of it. It's way too big now, and let's adjust transparency because it's way too saturated right now. So here we go, we have this image to follow along with. Next step, I modeled the head of the emoji and the party head. The head is basically a sphere a little bit modified to make it more flat here. And a party hat is a cone. So it's pretty easy to create. Now let's go to the fun part and create eyes, eyebrows, and the mouth. Let's go and grab a spline pen over here. And let's roughly draw a shape of the eyebrow here. Like so. Let's name them properly. Right now, all our splines are located in the middle of our composition, and we need the splines to follow a shape of the head of the emoji. I'm gonna use a project tool to project those splines on the face. Let's grab all our splines and then press Shift-C and search for project. We're going to use XY plane mode in the project and then hit apply. It's that easy. And now you see that all our points are on the surface of the sphere. Next, we're going to grab a capsule primitive from the primitives tab. Now it's way too big, let's adjust the size of it. And it's also not facing the right way. I think it's roughly a length of our eyebrow. And let's increase the amount of segments, height segments. Now we're going to go to a deformers tab and grab a spline wrap tool. This tool is going to be a child of our capsule, and we're going to drop eyebrow spline into spline in the properties. Now our eyebrow has a volume to it. We can also adjust the shape of it better in the size tab of a spline wrap, so it's more looking like an eyebrow. Yay, that looks good. Now let's repeat all the steps for an eye and the mouth. I can just copy a capsule and change the spline in the spline wrap. Okay, great. Now we have eyebrows, eyes, and the mouth. Now let's clean up, name everything properly, and group objects and create a second eyebrow and an eye. Now let's group everything that's related to eye and eyebrows. Let's press Alt-G to group it. Let's call it eyes. Now let's add a subdivision surface, because it needs to be subdivided a little bit. And then let's grab a symmetry object. So now we have a second eye and a second eyebrow. And now let's group mouth stuff too. We also need to subdivide it as well. Awesome, now we're ready to move on to the rigging phase of our project. As you can see, this emoji is just making two simple moves. So we can animate between these two poses using PoseMorph tag. PoseMorph is a rigging tag that we can apply to our spline. Let's right click on eyebrow spline, go to rigging tags, and select PoseMorph. Here we should put the check marks on each property that we want PoseMorph tag to store. In this case, it will be position, points, hierarchy, and rotation. Then we go to the tag, and here we make sure that we are in edit mode. And now we're gonna adjust our spline to the pose that we need. So let's make sure that we are in the point mode over here. Let's try this capsule so it's easier to manipulate with points. Let's make sure it's not too far from the head. Like so. Okay, let's check. Yeah, that looks about right. And now in a pose morph tag, we can go to animate mode and animate the strength to switch between the two poses that we have. So in this case, I would animate from 100 to 0. You can also grab this strength tag and put it on your screen, and this way you can just like manipulate with your slider on the screen, and it might be more convenient versus going and looking for all these properties to animate. So it's kind of like similar to sliders in Joysticks and Sliders plugin in After Effects. Now repeat all the same steps for eyes and the mouth. I'm not gonna do it just for the sake of time. Instead, I'm going to move on to rigging a party horn for this emoji. So here I have a holder for the party horn already created. It's nothing too crazy, it's just like capsule and a cylinder. And now I want to show you how I created this part of the party horn and how I animated it. Let's go to Primitives tab and grab a cube. Let's adjust its size. And let's add a lot of segments on the X. Now we're gonna go to Deformers tab and grab a spline wrap. Let's make it the child of the cube. Oh, I forgot, on the cube I also want to add some roundings on the edges. And here in the spline wrap, instead of the normal spline, I'm gonna use a tool called MoSpline. It's located in the Cloner tab. Let's grab it, and now it's facing the wrong way, so we're gonna change that. And let's place it under spline in the spline wrap. So now it's like way too long, so let's adjust the length. And now we can just like manipulate with the band to create the shape that we need, and it should be like fairly bended. And here in the spline settings, we can manipulate with it to create the shape that we need. If you press Ctrl, you can create additional points, and you should also change the type to soft to get the sandals. Then you can now manipulate with as well. It's kind of flat in the beginning and then very curved. Let's add more band. Like so. And now also let's adjust the size of the spline wrap, because it's kind of going like more thin over here. Okay, that looks not bad. Let's also add a subdivision surface and subdivide our cube a little bit. So now basically all you need to do to animate it is just animate this bend property. So let's start with this pose. Then it goes very flat, maybe even minus. Then it stays in this position for a little bit. And then it comes back. You can kind of play around with animation. I can do it very long time, but it's just like for the sake of demonstration of what's possible. And also, since we used a moss plant, which is technically from the cloner family, we can also use a cloner effectors on it, which will give us like a pretty sweet overshoot. So if you go to Mograph, Effector, and grab a delay, make sure it's applied to our spline in under Effectors. And here, let's choose Spring, because it's very playful animation, so Spring fits. And let's see what's happening. Yay, we got like a little bounce, which looks pretty sweet. Awesome. So party horn is animated and ready to go. Let's look at the light and camera setup of our scene. So here I have all the textures and materials already applied to my emoji, but it still doesn't look right. It's not flattened enough and it looks kind of off, not like an actual emoji image. We can easily fix it with a camera focal length. So let's go grab a camera, make it active, and let's place it in the center of our composition. Still doesn't look right. This is because we need to go to Object, Focal Length, and change it to Tele. Here we go. Now it's like closer to what we have. In general, with Stylized 3D, Tele and Super Tele lenses work better. They give it the right flattened look. I'm gonna stick with Tele for this one. Now let's go to our redshift setup so we can see what's happening in our scene. And next, I'm going to go to Redshift, Lights, and grab a dome light. I want the scene to look like it was light in a studio. That's why I'm going to grab one of the studio HDRIs from Grayscale Gorilla. So let's see what changed. Awesome. You can also press R and rotate a dome light. This way you can control where shadows go, where they're located. After that, I go to Redshift, Lights, and grab an area light. It's gonna be a key light of our scene. So I also like to do add target and a null, and this way my light will be following the null in the scene. So I'm just gonna place this null in the center of our emoji, And now it's easier to manipulate with this light. I'm also gonna make it smaller. Now it's like way too harsh. And I'm just gonna place it where I want my shadows to be. In general, it's a good practice to combine, to make shadows from key light in the same spot where your dome light shadows are. Like so. Yeah, that looks right. And another light source you can add to the scene, I call it rim light. So I can just copy this one and call it rim. It's gonna give us this like nice rim on this side. So let's place it behind our emoji. Nice, so here it is. Just a tiny bit of rim. Let's make it more narrow. And let's probably turn it down the exposure tiny bit. Nice. So I can tweak it for hours and hours, but this is my general approach to lighting this stylized 3D scene, is like having a good HDRI and a dome light, have a key light in the scene, and the rim light. Now we've learned how to create a simple 3D emoji, and you see how easy it is to do with Cinema 4D and Redshift. Next we are going to talk about stylized 3D looping animation. In this animation I wanted to recreate my experience walking to school in winter as a kid. Where I grew up it was always very cold in the winter. It was also always so dark because it's an early morning, you need to make it to school by 8 AM. And you walking through this a tunnel of snow and you can barely move because there's so much clothes on you. All the buildings look the same. I wanted to recreate this experience in this animation. I modeled this character with box modeling technique. It's a technique where a primitive shape such as cube or sphere is used to make the basic shape of the final model. All limbs of my model are separated because I used a bendy limbs rig tool to rig this character later on. As you can see, legs are not even attached to anything. After I modeled my character, I rigged it with bendy limbs rig from iDesign.com. This plugin allowed me to finally start animating characters in 3D because it's so easy to use. After my character was rigged, I animated the walk cycle. Whenever I need to animate a character, I use Animator's Survival Kit. It's an amazing book that works really well as a guide for any kind of like character animation. So I basically was animating pose to pose. Now I would love to talk more about rigging the straps of the school bag. So straps of this bag should be attached to the bag, but also stay around the shoulder. So when the bag moves, it's kind of stretchy over here, but it's like stays on the shoulders and follow the walk cycle with the body. So it was kind of a challenge to create those straps, but eventually I found the way that worked perfectly for this project, and I'm gonna show it to you. Let's start with shine the head, so it's not on the way, and then let's grab a null. Then let's go to shape and change it to any kind of shape. I will do a circle. Make it smaller, change orientation, and let's place it where a strap will start. So it's approximately over here. Now I'm going to copy this null and basically place all of them around the shoulder and where our straps is going. So the second one, like so. Okay, here's good. Make sure it's not hidden behind the body. So in this particular case, around 8-9 nulls worked perfectly fine. So the last one should be attached to the bag as well. Now let's grab a tracer object from the cloner tab, and we're gonna place all our nulls in a trace link. Let's right click and start pick session. And let's place them properly. One after another. Okay, great. Now let's go to this tab and grab a sweep object. We're gonna use a tracer in a sweep as a spline, and we're going to wrap up a rectangle around it. Let's add some rounding as well. And it's not working because I didn't press connect all objects in a tracer object. Okay, so now we got something. That still needs a lot of adjustment though. So let's change the type of spline to B-spline. And intermediate points to uniform, because it will give us a better geometry, more even geometry. And let's adjust the size of the rectangle. So now we just need to move around our nulls to make sure they're in the right place. And this way our strap will follow the shoulder. I'm not too worried about this part because nobody will actually see it. We only see our character from behind. So it just need to be semi-attached to the bag. Like so. Just moving the nulls. Let's make sure that it's like following the body of the character properly. Okay, now a strap is following a shoulder and it's attached to the bag. Maybe a little bit more adjustment. Let's subdivide our strap. Let's grab a subdivision surface and place sweep underneath it. And let's also grab a symmetry object. And now we have a second strap over here. Now, in order for it to be attached to the bag properly and be stretchy in this part, we need to place two last and two first nulls under the bag null. Alt G to group them. So now when you move the bag, it's stretching out and it stays on the shoulders. Let's place the rest of the nulls under the body. So now we can move it separately or stretch them with moves of the bag. Awesome, now our straps of the bag are rigged and ready for the animation. Next, I want to show you how I modeled a bank of snow in this scene, because it's a very easy and cool technique. We're gonna start by grabbing a cube from our primitive stub. Let's adjust its size, and we will need a lot of segments, about 60. Now let's go to deformer stub and grab FFD deformer. Let's make it a child of the cube. Press fit to parent. Now let's adjust the grid points. Let's go to the point mode, and now we basically can just pull out all these points and shape the snow that we want. I really like this technique because it's like so easy and it gives this very smooth look, and that was exactly the look I was going for in the scene and animation. It's very stylized. Now let's look at how I made a loop for background elements in this scene. As I mentioned before, first I created a looping walk cycle for the character. And I also needed a background to move alongside with the character, so it will look like she's going somewhere. I started thinking on how to loop it. Let's get off camera here. So as you can see, all my background elements are wrapped around a giant cylinder, which is incredibly inefficient because I have all these unnecessary polygons I wouldn't have otherwise. But hey, it really worked for this animation, and it gives us an impression that my character almost going up the hill versus the flat surface, and it's more interesting visually. Let me show you how I achieved that. Here I have a couple of buildings. They're all supposed to look the same because I don't need that much of a variety of background elements. The whole point of this video is that the buildings in the town where I'm from all looked kind of similar. I also have a street lamp here, which gives this scene a light, and a few banks of snow. I want all of these elements to be multiplied and wrapped around the cylinder. Let's group all of them. Let's press Alt G, and let's add a cloner to a scene. Let's make a null a child of a cloner, and let's change grid to radial. Okay, let's see what's going on. Okay, the orientation is wrong, so let's change it to ZY, and let's make radius bigger. Let's unshy our Earth, as we call it. And let's move cloner to its place. Okay, the radius should definitely be bigger in the cloner. And now let's make sure that axes of a cloner are aligned with the cylinder center. Let's enable snapping. I think it's enabled already. Let's snap it. Let's also grab a different null, and let's also snap its center to the center of a cylinder. Okay, it looks good. Now let's make a cloner and the earth. Let's place them inside of a null and call it rotation. Now let's do a bit of a math to figure out how much we should rotate our null to create a loop. Full circle is 360 degrees, and we have our objects repeat 5 times around the cylinder. It's 5 times. If we divide 360 by 5, it's 72. So 72 is how much we are going to rotate the background to get a full loop. Now let's press Shift F3 to get our timeline. And let's go to View, Automatic Mode. This allows us to see all the keyframes that we have in the scene currently. It's the keyframes for the walk cycle of our character. It takes 32 frames to complete the walk cycle loop. So how fast we rotate should be able to be divided by 32. This way the background will line up with walk cycle perfectly. So let's start at frame 0. Let's go to our rotation null and press a keyframe for P rotation. So 32 4 times is 128. Let's jump to 128 keyframe and let's rotate it minus 72 degrees. Let's make a keyframe. Now let's go to curves and let's make sure that we change a keyframe interpolation to linear here, because it's a loop, and if it's linear, it will loop perfectly. Let's make the camera active. As you can see, our character is walking and background is moving accordingly. We created a looping animation. Last thing I wanted to demonstrate is how I created traces on snow for this animation. I have the character walking and I have a snow path. It's basically a part of the giant cylinder that we used to wrap all our background objects around. We're going to create traces on the snow from the character walking with the help of vertex maps and fields. A vertex is a point that exists in 3D space within your scene. Vertex maps store vertex-specific information within a model for a variety of uses. It also only works on editable geometry, so my snow is already converted, and as you can see, it's heavily subdivided as well, because we will need a lot of subdivision for what we're about to do. To start our vertex map, we need to grab a paint tool and press it anywhere on the snow object. So here on the right you see a vertex map. Let's check use fields and let's add a spherical field. It's way too big now. It's also in the center of a composition, so let's move it where we need it to be. And we actually need it to be aligned with our foot because our feet are making the traces on snow. So let's move it in a proper location. We're also going to make it a child of this foot. So the animation of the foot will drive this field. Let's duplicate it for the second foot and place it properly. Let's rotate it. It also needs to be, yeah, it's not in a vertex map yet. It also needs to be in max blending mode to leave the trace. Okay, here we go. So character walking. It doesn't leave the trail because we need to check out of date on in the freeze layer. Here we go. So it leaves trails with animation because the animation of our feet driving the spherical fields. However, we see it in color, but we don't see any changes in the geometry of the snow. This is because we need to go to Deformers tab and grab a Displacer deformer. Let's make it the child of the snow. And let's add a shader, a color shader here. So everything kind of popped. We also need to add vertex map into the fields. So something is off. I think we just need to uncheck use deform points on a vertex map. Oh, here we go. Now it's kind of like popped up and we need it to be inverted. Let's fix it. So in the height needs to be minus volume. So now we can see the traces on the snow. They do look very choppy though, and not super smooth and very long. So let's fix all these issues. So let's go to the deformers and grab a smoothing deformer. Let's place it underneath the displacer. And now it's like too smooth. Let's add a little bit of stiffness to it. Like 80 should be enough. Nice, so it's nice and smooth, but it's still like trails are pretty long. We can also adjust our freeze layer settings. Maybe make it 90 or something. Let's see. Let's see if it helped. Yeah, it's a little better. I feel like our traces are still pretty deep, so maybe we should just move our spherical fields up a little bit. Like so. Okay, let's see. Now it looks pretty good. The character is walking and leaving some traces on the snow. Awesome! We recreated this stylized 3D looping animation. I hope after this presentation you see how easy it is to start creating stylized 3D animation with Cinema 4D and Redshift. Thanks so much for joining. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can contact me through my website or on Instagram or Twitter. I'm ts_motion. Thanks again.